Well, the Secret Service does not have any audio recordings or transcripts of conversations that took place in the White House since Donald Trump became president. That, according to the Wall Street Journal, after the newspaper submitted a Freedom of Information request. Democrats and some Republican lawmakers have called for President Trump to release any recordings of his conversations with former FBI Director James Comey. On Friday, President Trump said he'd talk about them maybe sometime in the very near future. Today, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer refused to go into more detail.
I think the president made it very clear on Friday that he would get back as soon as possible on this and his position on that conversation.
So what is he waiting for? What's the delay?
He's not waiting for anything. When he's ready to further discuss it, he will.
Earlier today at a cabinet meeting, President Trump did not respond to a reporter's question about whether there are tapes. Let's bring in our panel. Brad Blakeman is a Republican strategist and former advisor to President George W. Bush. Christy Setzer is a Democratic strategist and former Iowa press secretary for Al Gore's presidential campaign. She's also president and founder of New Heights Communications. So, first question to you, Christy. Do Democrats expect that there are tapes, and would they buttress the Democratic claims against the president?
Like James Comey, I'll say, Lordy, I hope there are tapes. But no, I don't think that there are tapes. I think this was a way of President Trump trying to intimidate James Comey. It's apparently something that he's done a number of times in the past, whether it's to reporters or other people he's trying to intimidate by telling them that he's recording their conversation. The reason, of course, that he's been putting it off when people ask him directly if there are tapes and saying, I'll tell you later, is because he knows he's been backed into a corner. He's put both his press secretaries and his staff in a very difficult position right now because obviously they can't say, no, he just made it up. So they're struggling to say something that would make the president look credible here.
Well, it all started with that tweet from the president, Brad, in which he wrote that James Comey better hope there aren't tapes of their conversations. He didn't flat out say that he had them.
That's right. And it was, if anything, it was a warning for Comey to tell the truth and tell it as if he did have a tape recording of his conversation. We don't know if the president had him taped or not. He certainly had the right to do it under the law. But the real question now is, for the president, is he's going to cooperate to the fullest extent with the congressional investigations and with this special counsel, Bob Mueller. So in the course of that investigation, it will come out whether or not tapes exist. But it's not going to be at the will of the press. It's going to be at the direction of the relevant committees or the special counsel.
The president, Brad, if you were advising him, would you tell him to come out with a statement one way or the other, or do you just let this information, this question kind of hang out there?
I would advise the president, I'm sure as his attorneys did, now that there are congressional investigations and a special counsel, follow their direction and their request. Don't get baited into anything extraordinary beyond that, because this has got to be something that follows a protocol. And the protocols have now been established by the House, the Senate, and now the Justice Department through the special counsel. Follow their direction.
The Russia thing seems to be at the center of this whole story, Christy, and that is not helpful for the White House.
No, it is not. And what is also not helpful is the pattern that the president seems to be creating here of potentially trying to fire people who get too close to the Russia investigation. Right now we have at least several people we can point to, from Preet Bharara to Sally Yates to Jim Comey, to now obviously talk of whether or not he wants to try to fire Robert Mueller, all of whom have been guilty of one thing and one thing only, which is looking into Russia and whether or not the president has inappropriate ties there. So that's not a situation we want to get into. We don't live in a dictatorship. We still live in a democracy. That's not going to be healthy for anybody.
Well, in the case of Preet Bharara, worth pointing out, it's pretty typical for an incoming administration to replace a U.S. attorney. Preet Bharara was a U.S. attorney here in New York.
That's true, but there were other things there where he had, much like Jim Comey, Preet Bharara had said that the president had tried to sort of butter him up and get close to him, and then when it seemed as though he was not interested in that, that is when he fired him as well. So maybe that timing is suspicious, maybe it's not, I'm not sure.
Christy Setzer and Brad Blakeman, thank you both.